Good afternoon and welcome to CCK Live. My name is Jenna Zelmer and joining me today is Mike Lestrito. The two of us are both attorneys representing veterans at both VA and at the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. And today we're going to be discussing why veterans should hire an attorney or should consider hiring an attorney for their VA appeal. So, Mike, why don't you start us off with just a little bit of an appeals overview? I think that'll kind of put this in context.
Absolutely. So when a VA claim is denied or a veteran is not satisfied with a rating that they've been assigned, veterans have the option to appeal the decision, and should consider doing so very strongly. Under the AMA, which is the Appeals Modernization Act, the new appellate process for filing claims and appealing claims at the Department of Veterans Affairs, veterans have 1 year to file an appeal from the date that a rating decision was issued. Under the AMA, this is in some ways much more complicated than it used to be in what was known as the old legacy system, because veterans now have 3 different lanes that they must select from in order to properly appeal their case. The first lane is the higher level review lane, the second, the supplemental claim lane, or the third, the notice of disagreement lane, which is also known as an appeal to the Board of Veterans Appeals. And so this is complicated because, number one, veterans have choices to choose from, each with their own specific criteria and advantages and disadvantages, but each also creates within the AMA something known as an evidentiary window. And so, in some of these appeal options, veterans are not only allowed but required to submit evidence. In others, they're not allowed to submit evidence at all. So working through that can be a little complex. Both the higher level review and supplemental claim lanes yield an additional rating decision after those appeals have been either denied or approved. And then, if the veteran chooses to go to the board and files a notice of disagreement, then that appeal will produce a board decision. So upon receiving a decision, veterans have the opportunity to appeal, like we said. But the way that they can appeal is largely dependent upon the type of appeal that they submitted in the first instance. So this is another complicating factor within the AMA. So I'll walk us through some of the different options. So under the higher level review lane, if a veteran selects higher level review appeal of a rating decision, they'll then receive a higher level review decision in response. The veteran has 1 year to appeal that decision, but they can only do so by filing either a supplemental claim appeal or by filing a notice of disagreement. They may not file a higher level review appeal upon receiving a higher level review rating decision. If the veteran receives a supplemental claim rating decision, so they filed the supplemental claim appeal, they now receive a rating decision response, the veteran again has 1 year to appeal, but under this scenario, they have 1 year to file either a higher level review appeal, another supplemental claim appeal, or they can file an appeal at the board. If a veteran receives a board decision under the AMA, they can file a supplemental claim within 1 year by submitting or identifying new and relevant evidence, or they can appeal, as they always have been able to the court within 120 days. And finally, not to complicate matters further, but if a veteran receives a CAVC decision from the court, they have 1 year to file a supplemental claim appeal, or they can file, at the federal circuit within 60 days. And so there's, without getting into too much detail, hopefully, you can see that there are a lot of options, but with those options come sometimes a lot of confusion, unfortunately.
Yes, it's a little bit of a choose your own adventure with, some consequences depending on what route you choose, and that kind of foreclosing other alternative routes in the future. And it's very complicated. We have a lot of information on the different appeal options under the AMA and on the AMA in general on our website. So I would encourage any watchers out there to take a look at that. It has a nice flow chart of all the different ways that you can file these sort of layers of appeal. And so, while veterans can certainly file their own appeals without help, I think, Mike, your overview really brings it into focus how much having representation can be beneficial. And that representation can be an attorney or an accredited rep. So an accredited rep is not an attorney, but it's someone who has been trained and recognized by VA as competent and educated in veterans law in order to advise a veteran how to navigate the appeal system. So that's just all to say, the AMA created a lot of options for appeals. The idea of the AMA was to allow a veteran choice and control, but I think it also was very confusing. And, if you don't submit evidence in the right time frame, or if you fill out the wrong form, you're taking a risk in terms of not completing the appeal in the way that VA requires you to appeal it. So, a lot of times veterans who do handle appeals on their own might be unhappy with their new decision, which means that they're going to have to start all over again, as Mike, you outlined. You can file a supplemental claim if you're unhappy with your decision, but that just means that you have to continue this long, arduous process, and so it can take longer to get, your grant. So the benefit of the AMA is that you can continue to file that supplemental claim, but the downside is that it could take longer. And so it might be helpful to seek assistance from either an attorney or someone who's recognized by VA as an accredited agent, or even a veteran service organization, someone who's really knowledgeable about the benefits and pitfalls to all these different options. So, Mike, why don't you kind of tell us about why, in more detail, why a veteran would consider hiring an accredited rep or an attorney?
Yeah, so I think there are several considerations that people should think through. So representatives should have a deep understanding of VA law, all of the nuances and the complicating factors that go along with it, both in terms of kind of the substantive nature of the law, but also just the appellate process and understanding how VA processes claims. This will really help veterans to maximize their benefits. Perhaps they may be able to file a claim and have something granted, but they may not know what they don't know, and that might lead them to not be able to maximize the benefits that are ultimately granted or denied. And so, a representative should be able to understand VA's rating schedule for their VA disability claims, be familiar with the various conditions that are possible to be related or to be rated or to be service connected. Like I said, understand the nuances and the regulations. Now that we are working in the AMA world, as we kind of talked about, I think it's fair to say it's more complicated now than it's ever been. Not only do veterans have to navigate through the new AMA system, but they potentially might have claims in the old system that are working their way through the appeal process simultaneously. And so an understanding of both systems at the same time, how they work together, and the benefits and the pitfalls of each is really critical. Here at CCK, I can say our attorneys have been involved with the legislative process and many precedent-setting cases that have really set the standard for how many claims are rated, how conditions can get service connected. And so, on our website, I know we have a whole list of different cases that we've worked on, been part of, participated at oral argument. And so, we really, and other representatives too, have been part of that process. But that is an added feature, I think, that representatives can bring to the table. A second consideration is that representatives can help develop a stronger appeal to get a more favorable decision the first time around. And so I think any veteran that's been doing this for a while knows that oftentimes, unfortunately, they may have to file appeal upon appeal upon appeal to finally, many years down the road, get a favorable result. What representatives can do is add value in the sense that they can, appeal a decision in a way or choose a lane, particularly in AMA, that can maybe lead to a faster, more favorable decision rather than having to take the appeal down multiple appellate steps. For instance, in the AMA, there are three options, as we discussed, in order to appeal, an unsatisfactory rating decision. Choosing any of them may not necessarily be the incorrect choice, but choosing one of those three appeal options instead of the others may lead to a faster decision. It may lead to VA going and obtaining evidence that it otherwise would not be permitted to do. It may lead to a veteran or the veteran's representative submitting evidence that they otherwise would not be allowed to submit. And so, those are things that a representative should know how to navigate that get very tricky very quickly in the new AMA system. A third consideration, and this is something I do in my practice every single day, is help veterans gather the required evidence to support their case. And so whether it's a claim or an appeal for service connection, for an increased rating, for TDIU, whatever it may be, oftentimes additional evidence is needed in order to win the case. And so this evidence can come in many forms. It can come from, expert opinions that a representative may be able to provide, treatment records, obtaining affidavits and lay statements, or just making a legal argument in a legal brief. But those are things that representatives should be able to do to help support your case. Another consideration is that claims and appeals, of course, they can be filed, but it's one thing to file them correctly and in a timely manner, and that's really the key, is to file a claim and an appeal and meet the deadline. And so, at least speaking for us here at CCK, we keep very close track of all deadlines and make sure that the cases are moving along, and we're able to to monitor when a deadline is approaching, make sure that it is appropriately appealed. Other representatives I know can do that as well. But like I said, claims and appeals being filed correctly and in a timely manner can really make the difference between a veteran obtaining a benefit with 10 years of retroactive pay, or obtaining a benefit from the date that they filed going forward. And that can make a big difference in a veteran's financial situation and in their life. And finally, I'd say one thing that a representative can really do, or at least some representatives can do, is advocate for a client at court if the need arises. And so, as we mentioned a little earlier, if a veteran receives an unfavorable board decision, they have the option still in the AMA system to appeal that board decision to court within 120 days. And so, representatives who are admitted at court, who can practice at court, who have experience practicing at court, will be able to potentially further appeal a case, understanding the kind of the complex nature and what is involved with practicing at a federal tribunal.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because as you mentioned, all of the appeal option deadlines at VA are within 1 year. It's not until you get to the court level that your appeal deadline is 120 days. And so that's something that attorneys who regularly practice at court are very familiar with, including myself. And, if you're unrepresented as a veteran and you're used to the 1 year deadline, you might not know that it's a lot quicker if you want to appeal it to court. You have to do it within three or 4 months. And so I think the other thing that, kind of came up in my head while you were talking about deadlines and gathering evidence is that attorneys or accredited rep are so familiar with deadlines and they're so familiar with gathering evidence that they can use those two things strategically. And so they know how long it takes to gather a certain type of evidence. They know how long it takes to get an expert opinion on something or treatment records. And so, knowing that you have 1 year deadline to do all of that, you can work within that 1 year and be efficient while also making sure that you're building the strongest case within that year, rather than just making sure that you file a form on that 364th day, right? But without doing anything in that full year time period. The point of the year period is to allow you the option to kind of weigh your options and allow you time to gather evidence or make arguments. And so, if you're not having help from an accredited rep or an attorney, you might not kind of be thinking about that in the back of your head, and you might just realize, oh my gosh, it's almost the 1 year time period and I haven't done anything. I have to file this form really quickly. And so attorneys kind of take that burden off of you and do the heavy lifting for you in that time period.
And Jenna, just one other thing I was thinking, particularly as it relates to veterans and appealing a board decision to court. At least in my experience, not many veterans have the experience of filing the notice of appeal or any other related documents at court. It's really a very specific process, a unique process, something that I've found not many veterans have experience with. And so kind of the inside knowledge that a representative, I think, can provide with appealing a case to court is really important for those sorts of cases in particular.
Definitely. And that's a really good point, because the court system, I think it's really important to note, and we've mentioned this in other videos, but it's always important to repeat it, is that the court is completely different from VA. And so veterans who are used to operating within the VA system try to appeal to court and are confused about the adversarial process. VA at that point is going to have an attorney representing the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. That attorney is going to be arguing to the court about why the board made a correct decision. And so it's important to be on even playing field there and to have an equally knowledgeable attorney representing your side as a veteran and explaining to the court why the board's decision was wrong. I think that's a really good point, Mike. Great. Mike, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I don't. I think, I just think again, with AMA, it's really changed the game in a lot of ways, so to speak. And I just want to emphasize again that, as of now, the two systems, the old legacy appeal system and the AMA system, are working together. And people that are pursuing claims and appeals either on their own or with, a representative, accredited representative, really need to understand how both systems work and how they work independently, but also together. And that's going to be really important for ultimately the success of your case.
Great. I think that's a great closing thought. So for more information on choosing the right representative to assist you in your appeal, please check out our website. We also have a ton of information on our blog and on our other videos on YouTube. And so thank you so much for tuning in to learn more about claims and appeals and VA benefits in general. You can visit our blog and browse our other videos. And please be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for joining me today, Mike.